All right, so as I said in the first video, Steve Rhodes has some really interesting ways of looking at tone, color, and line. And he goes in that order too, which is the same order Ra goes in the Rave Cosmology materials. I mean, he starts with tone, the tonal underpinning. Now, as I was saying in the first video, Steve Rhodes doesn't really teach. He just tells. So he's not, like, I had to reverse engineer it. I had to look at the tones and read and kind of hear what he was saying about them. He doesn't call them tone. He only talks about the level of triangle, and he doesn't tell you how he arrives at triangle or any of this. I mean, he's not teaching the system in his book. And this is why I always am laughing about who is it really for, because somebody like me, I can reverse engineer what he's saying, and I can translate it to normal language, which would be something like, hey guys, here's my original research that I've come up with. And when you're looking at tones 1 and 2, or when you're looking at color 3 and 4, here's what I'm noticing. But instead, he has all of his own idiosyncratic system, and he's created it all, and it's fine. I mean, I'm totally happy with his creation of the mental Maya of Baantu. It's just he doesn't tell you how he's done it, so you need to be somebody like me who is so familiar with human design at such a deep level that you can translate what he's saying and understand how he's arrived at it. And then I can judge for myself and go, oh yeah, I'm thinking back to this friend, that friend, this friend, that friend, all these people I know, people I've known throughout my life, family members, loved ones, coworkers, so on. And I think back and I go, oh, I guess that is true. Good point, Steve. I never thought of it that way. Or, I don't know, Steve. I don't know if I really agree with you there. Because, see, I'm able to translate and to then actually judge for myself and think for myself about it and consider it to myself whether that fits, whether that explanation makes sense, whether I understand it, whether it's logical, whether it, and whether it's a good story and so on. And for the most part, it is. And I do like his system. And that's why it's so funny, is because he's just his own worst enemy, because he's basically writing it for a mass audience. And I think this might still be some fantasy. I don't know, but he talked about when he was younger having a fantasy of being a famous musician and so on. And I think writing for the mass audience is the fantasy of it going viral and changing the world and becoming this big thing. And all I would say is I think it's much better to go for a much smaller audience. I mean, like with me and my YouTube, I'm going for the audience of the people that understand what I'm talking about and that relate to me. And if you understand what I'm talking about and relate to me, then you're my audience. And then chances are we'd probably get along because we're on fractal lines with each other. And I'm probably more his audience than the people he's writing for in his head. That's all I would say. That because he's innocence and I'm desire, I really do see when innocent people fall into their desire, just like they can probably see when I fall into my innocence. And I mean, it's funny because part of desire is actually not about seeing, it's about ignoring. It's about putting blinders on. It's about not being a bystander, but rushing in and taking sides. And when you're doing that, you don't have time to observe a whole lot of different things and to notice a whole lot of different things because you're kind of tunnel vision locked into your goal. And that's a big part of desire. And he's innocence. So for him, he's here to observe. And actually one of the things that I've really enjoyed is that I've really seen, I mean, the bad parts of it are the desire and the good parts are the innocence. It's as simple as that. And he would say there's no good and bad, right? Because that's a very, to me, the ultimate not self is it's all relative. And because Steve Rhodes rejects things like the notion of transference or the notion of type or strategy and authority or all of this, he's almost like a nihilist, absolutist of, his own biases, really. I think he's an INFJ personality-wise, and I think it's very common for INFJs. It's like INFJ versus ISTP. ISTP are the ultimate skeptics. That's Ra. Ra was skeptical of everything. Steve Rhodes is skeptical of nothing as long as it comes from him, right? As long as it's from his intuition, because he's an introverted, intuitive dominant. So I see the little Lord Fauntleroy genius trope. I mean, I'm an INTJ, he's an INFJ. I see that I recognize, it's like we recognize our own. I'm also a virtuoso musician, and I'm also a producer who's worked in different, and so on, and this and this and this. It's just introverted, intuitive things. But The difference is when I started getting really into human design, I, about a year in, had an extended experience of my inferior function and a sort of transformative experience that forever solidified to me and locked me into my desire of seeing the difference between the self and the not self, the difference between being alive and being and just waiting to die, the difference between being awake and just sleepwalking, right? And I'm not saying that I had some amazing awakening experience, but I had some kind of awakening. And it was really an awakening to my inferior function and to sort of rejection of my dominant mode of mind-driven decision-making. And at the end of the day, I still see things like transference as the signposts, right? So here's an example. I was in the car with my friends. We're driving down the street. I was in the back seat, and we saw a lost dog, and they started saying, "Oh, what should we do?" And I just said, "Stop the car." Immediately, I interrupted them and opened the door and went out and grabbed the dog. And, or, here's another example is I was in line at a cafe, and someone dropped a credit card. This, young girl dropped a card, and it fell through the cracks of where we were standing in line and went underneath this sort of raised deck that we were standing on. It was outdoor, and she just started crying. She's 12 years old or something, and I just immediately went and hopped over the fence, climbed under there, crawled on my belly through the trash and leaves and everything, got it and came back out and gave it to her. This is desire. Desire immediately jumps in, immediately does what needs to be done. It doesn't even think twice about it. There's no thinking about it. It's the immediate locking in, doing what needs to be done, taking the action. And yeah, it's so interesting because how he even understands these things, it's also because I'm tone 3, right? I'm actually 3-3. So how he understands tone 3 and how he understands color 3, he understands it as only caring what other people think about and then having a sort of realistic self-confidence level. And because of my realistic self-confidence, I'm able to kind of jump into situations not at the same level as he can with innocence, which is extremely high confidence in his system, like insanely high confidence, like more confident than you could imagine. Although he also has the lowest confidence on the design side, being first color, dietary regimen. And in any case, I guess what I'm saying is just, it's interesting seeing in his system and then seeing how I live my life and my kind of experience of being locked into my desire and how before I had human design, I was so in innocence, right? Because my whole point is, for me, really, and this is coming up on my 7 years here, this has been 7 years of intense deconditioning and coming to what is effectively coming to myself. And it's kind of, it's the come to Jesus moment, right? Where you kind of get real. And I won't say it was some traumatic dark night of the soul. I think that actually happened maybe the first year in, or around the first year, because I was already going through that. But, I'm turning 39 this year, so I was 32 or 31 when I encountered human design. Now, that's not actually true, because I encountered human design when I was 23. I found the emails. I was actually 22 years old, a month before my birthday, 6 weeks. And my mom had emailed me a reflector to introduce me to human design because her boyfriend, Marcello, who owned an Italian restaurant in Seattle, had been into it. And I didn't get into it. She just said, check it out. And I remember looking at it and just going, okay, whatever, 22 years old. I don't care about this stuff. It was August 2006. And I had just had a bad fire in March 17th of 2006. There was a fire where I lost some of my belongings. It was arson. My neighbor set fire to the building. And me and my 5'1" girlfriend woke up at 9 a.m. with flames and, escaped and handled the crisis, as 5'1s are wont to do. And yeah, it was a few months after that, and then I got my job at Amazon in September 2006, and I worked there for 3.5 years. But yeah, so that was the time that I was exposed to human design, and then it wasn't until 2015, at this sort of rock bottom place and really dark time in my life, and going through a lot, that human design could get through to me. It's like you have to weaken your immune system. You have to weaken to let things in. And so that's when it actually got through to me. And then it was about 9 months after that. It was June of 2016 when I had my sacral awakening experience. And I had like 8 days, 7 or 8 days, not like Ra's 8 days, but my own 8 days. And it really was, where my mind shut off, and I would stop keeping track of things. And it was a really interesting experience. Everything was in super high resolution. People told me I was a really good listener. Everything slowed down. I basically was able to break free from the clutches of my dominant introverted intuition and go deep into my inferior extroverted sensing. So for people who know personality typology, I was in an extended grip state, to use Naomi Quank's term. If you look up Naomi Quank, Quenk, she has a book, Was That Really Me?, all about the grip of the inferior function. And she coined this term grip when we're triggered into a grip state, like a fugue state almost, or a dissociative state, where we're captured in this. For most people, it's panic or hell or anxiety attack of some kind or something like that. For me, I'd already had extended bouts of, not extended, but week-long bouts of depersonalization, more than a day, multi-day bouts of depersonalization and of severe anxiety. And so what's interesting is, with the extreme anxiety attacks and the depersonalization, that prepared me. It's like that's what I felt going into that same state, which after human design I was equipped for, because I could surrender completely to it. So the exact same state of the anxiety attack, that is the waking up, the enlightenment experience, whatever you want to call it, waking up to the reality of things, seeing clearly, seeing with eyes wide open, having a sort of full brain cognition and cognitive effect, and a full body intelligence. Like the intelligence is no longer localized in this thing trying to control the puppet, but goes poof throughout the whole body. And having that sort of experience is the anxiety attack. It's the same thing that's the constriction and the panic, the feeling of danger. All of these things are the anxiety attack, the depersonalization, the fear of going insane, the looking at people like they're not real and they're just plastic and fake, and the time distortions, all of the cognitive effects that people are hospitalized for, I believe, are also equivalent to the thrill and excitement that you experience when you're surrendered as a sort of passenger consciousness through human design. So I don't talk about that a lot, but and obviously I'm not trying to diminish the very real mental health problems people have, because I'm not somebody who tries to downplay the problems, by saying it's not really a problem and it's just perspective and so on. That's more of the not self. The not self is always this relativist garbage. Ra even said that relativism is the ultimate vestige of the not self, to paraphrase him. Anyway, I don't remember the exact quote. I don't think he used the term vestige, but it's maybe the ultimate refuge is rather the term. Where you can ultimately, the mind loves relativism because it can use relativism to make excuses for anything. It can endlessly make excuses for why it should keep making decisions, endlessly make excuses for why it should stay in control, endlessly make excuses for why the not self theme, why the truth has to be avoided if you have undefined solar plexus. Relativism allows you to infinitely say, well, is it really good to confront the truth anyway? What does it really matter in the end? And isn't it all perspective? And how do we even know what we mean by confronting truth? What you call it is different from what I call it. And, so relativism is the ultimate not self. The not self hates dogma. The not self hates absolutism, because absolutism and dogma is the only thing that can truly overcome the not self, the absolutism and dogma of strategy and authority. Which brings me to Steve Rhodes. He's not a strategy and authority guy, nor a type guy, nor a one is better than the other guy. The real thing, the not thing, what's the difference? The true self, the not self. He's ultimately quite nihilist. And it's interesting to see someone who doesn't care about transference. I mean, I don't even want to criticize it, because I can see it. Like, maybe that is his living his design of innocence. Maybe innocence is supposed to be a little bit, and he's right variable, right? Maybe right variable is supposed to be a little beyond the binary, and is it really a binary anyway? I mean, it's an interesting question, and he's at the end of the road, and it's kind of like, where do you get to when you get to the end? Well, you get to Steve Rhodes. He's not a 6'3". That would be the next step, right? He's a 6'2". Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is. If anybody knows, please post in the comments. But I think he's a 6'2" because of, I haven't finished the book yet. I'm only on page 61. But if I've understood what he said correctly from the book, so if I'm wrong about that, then I think I might, it's because I haven't really fully translated what he said back into human design. I'm doing my best, but when he talks about himself and he says that he has this or that configuration in Baantu, I'm then trying to extrapolate back to what his chart is. I think I did see his chart years and years and years ago, but even then it might have just been a Baantu chart, and in the last few years he changed them so they no longer show the lines or anything. They don't show line, color, tone anymore. They used to. Now they just show circle, hexagon, and triangle, which again are extrapolated qualities from line, color, and tone, respectively. So, okay. So anyway, in the next video, I want to go into some of what he actually says. I think we'll start with tone, which is where he starts. But I just kind of, for this video, I just want to kind of think about, in general, his approach. He's an innocence person, so maybe it's correct for him, and he's right variable, so maybe it's correct for him to be somewhat, what does it matter if you follow your strategy and authority or not? There's no such thing as strategy and authority. There's no such thing as, that seems what he is kind of doing, is like this termite effect of trying to eat away at any monolithic, determinate, actual statement of fact. Excuse me, the dog here. So that seems to be his kind of fundamental. And so it raises the question, is that really his innocence or not? Now, my take on it is that his innocence is where his amazing observations come from. And I love some of these observations. I do not mean to slam Steve Rhodes at all. And if you're watching Steve, I'm really looking forward to contacting you once I'm more solid. I'm a 5'1". It takes me years and years and years to feel solid enough to reach out to somebody and to, that first line unconscious need to triple check everything and so on, and just to come to a deep understanding and a solid foundation first. But besides that, I really do hope we can collaborate someday. But or just connect. I was out in London, and I kind of regretted not seeing if you lived there and if you were available to meet for coffee or tea or something. But I see Steve's innocence, because innocence to me is the ultimate observer, that it makes totally unique, interesting observations nobody else has ever made before. They notice things nobody else has noticed. They see things nobody else sees, and it's because they don't care about the outcome. It's because they're the ultimate bystanders. It's because they can watch a lost dog and not help the lost dog. It's because somebody comes to them and has a problem, and they say, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. The desire is when Steve Rhodes goes into the he's here to help others thing. He's here to be involved thing. He's here to tell them what they should be doing and their goals and so on. And that comes in with the coloring of it. We don't want our innocence to be colored in any way, right? And I'm desire. I'm extremely opinionated, and I'm extremely colored in everything I do. I mean, to color something is literally why Ra uses the term color. He talks about this is what colors, it colored the whole night because they had a fight earlier that day, or it colored the whole thing, or, everything was rose colored, or everything was, he uses the term color in this sense. And innocence is devoid of all color. It has to have no color at all. It has to have true, lack of bias, and it can't be rooting for one side or the other, and it can't be trying to get somebody to wake up, or trying to get them to heal, or trying to get them to have a better life, or trying to get them to overcome their trauma, or trying to get them to let go of something, or anything. It can't be trying at all. It has to be observing and noticing what they're doing. And it can have the most amazing observations when it truly is in this purity of observation. So this is what I think is Steve Rhodes at his best, and the Baantu system at its best. And I'm putting him in the context of Randy Richmond Jr., Jr., who's also a 6'2" innocence person who is into human design. And so I look at both of them and I try to look for their observations and look for what they noticed that nobody else noticed, and look for their way of describing what they're seeing. That is incredible. I don't go to them for the goals or any of that, and I can see when, the cover of the God Code and the subtitle, "We Are Robots!" exclamation point, and the way it's written, and his, just his whole approach and his writing for the mass market and the mass audience is so desire. It's so agenda driven. It's so homogenized and hokey and like a, cheap, like a Better Call Saul style advertisement, or, it's like, yeah, Saul Goodman, Jimmy, for those who watch Better Call Saul, that's a great example of someone who should be innocence but gets wrapped up in desire, and how hokey it looks and how weird it looks when the innocence person is in their sort of homogenized desire. And so again, this is a huge difference between myself and core human design, as sort of, we use the transference as a signpost, right? And we look at the transferred color as the not self, or what the not self pulls us toward, and we look at it as a signpost for who's correct for us or not, who's pulling us to our right color, our correct color or not. And for Steve Rhodes, there's no difference. There's no better or worse. It's completely relative. So it's an interesting thing. Like I do wonder about, and color always transfers. So in some sense, he's right. Color never fully locks. But at the same time, I'm always going to be on the side of sort of standing for something. I'm desire. I have to take sides. And maybe he is living his design by being beyond the binary and just going, doesn't make a difference, really. All right, thanks for watching. We're going to get into some of the nitty gritty in future ones. This was just kind of a nice little rumination on Steve Rhodes and how his approach differs from mine, and so on. So thanks for watching.